I remember the exact moment my phone lit up with a call from Los Angeles. It was Jinger. Her voice wasn't the quiet, compliant one the world knew. It was trembling with a kind of courage I hadn't heard in years. She told me, "Jail, I can't protect the image anymore when the truth is this dark. For decades, our family was built on a foundation of absolute authority and financial transparency. But today, I am holding the documents that prove it was all a facade. The 20 million forensic audit isn't just a number. It's the paper trail of how our lives were commodified and our futures were traded for control, from my home in Oklahoma to Jana's sanctuary in Nebraska and Jinger's rebellion in LA. The umbrella of protection has officially folded. My mother, Michelle, has finally stepped out from the shadows of the big house. And for the first time, we are all comparing notes. We are no longer 19 separate secrets. We are one voice. In the next hour, I'm going to take you through all 15 chapters of this downfall. I'll reveal Jinger's private confession, the exact moment my father realized he lost us, and the evidence that confirms the Duggar empire is over. This is the full, unfiltered story of our escape, a don't turn away. The truth doesn't just set you free, it changes everything. Let's begin. It was a Tuesday evening in Oklahoma, the kind of quiet night where you finally feel like you can breathe. My kids were asleep and the house was still. Then my phone buzzed. It was Jinger. Usually we text about coffee or the kids, but seeing her name on the screen at that hour felt different. There was a weight to it before I even picked up. When I answered, there was a long silence. I could hear the city sounds of Los Angeles in the background, the distant sirens, the hum of a world so far removed from the Tontitown compound where we grew up. Then Jinger spoke. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the years of repressed emotion finally reaching the surface. She said, "Jill, I'm looking at the Hollywood sign, and for the first time, it doesn't look like a symbol of a world I should be afraid of. It looks like a witness to the truth I've been hiding." We talked for hours. She told me about the nights she spent awake in LA, grappling with the umbrella of protection teaching that had kept us small for so long. She confessed that for years, she felt like she was living a double life, playing the part of the perfect, compliant daughter while her soul was screaming for honesty. She told me, "Jill, I saw the reports about the 20 million. I saw what Dad did with the ministry funds. I can't sit in this beautiful house in California and pretend our childhood was a fairy tale when our mother is finally finding the courage to leave." That was the moment I knew the sisterhood had truly shifted. Jinger wasn't just asking for my advice anymore. She was declaring her independence. She recounted a specific meeting she had with our father months ago, one that the cameras never saw. He had asked her to sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a family gift. Jinger looked him in the eyes and refused. She realized then that his love always came with a contract. I realized, she told me, that I wasn't a daughter to him. I was an asset to be managed. This phone call wasn't just a conversation, it was a strategic alliance. We compared notes on the financial manipulation we both experienced. We talked about Jana's bravery in Nebraska and how we could support Mom without letting the cycle of guilt pull her back. By the time we hung up, the sun was starting to rise. Jinger's final words to me that night were, "The big house might have the walls, Jill, but we have the keys." But we had changed the trajectory of the Duggar legacy forever. It was the night the favorite daughter became the most dangerous witness against the system. When people talk about the 20 million gap in my father's ministry, they often treat it like a dry financial statistic. But to me, that number represents every skipped meal, every second hand dress, and every hour of free labor we gave to a brand that promised us we were building treasures in heaven. The truth is, the treasures were being stored right here on earth, just not in our names. I remember the day I found the first piece of the puzzle. It wasn't in a safe or a hidden vault. It was in a box of old ministry records that had been moved to a storage shed during the chaos of the lawsuits. I was looking for my own birth certificate, but what I found was a ledger, a thick black binder with global ministry protection embossed on the front in fading gold letters. As I turned the pages, my heart began to race. I wasn't looking at donation receipts. I was looking at a map of a shell game. Millions of dollars were being funneled through various LLCs, names I recognized from documents my father had asked me to sign when I was barely 20 years old. There were entries for property acquisition in states we had never visited and consulting fees paid to companies that didn't seem to exist. But the most devastating part wasn't just the money, it was the dates. While we were being told that the family was struggling and that we needed to do more reality TV to support the mission, the ledger showed millions flowing into private accounts. There was one specific entry from 2014, the year I got married. While Derek and I were living in a small rental and trying to figure out our future, nearly 1.5 million had been moved into a trust fund that none of us siblings even knew existed. I called Jinger and read her some of the numbers. I could hear her gasping on the other end. She told me about a similar discovery she made regarding the book royalties. We realized then that the umbrella of protection wasn't just a spiritual teaching. It was a legal shield used to keep us from asking where the money went. The forensic audit we've conducted since then has only made the picture darker. It wasn't just bad bookkeeping. It was a systematic effort to ensure that the children who built the Duggar brand would never have the financial means to leave it. They wanted us dependent. They wanted us silent. But they forgot one thing. They taught us how to read the word, and in doing so, they taught us how to find the truth hidden in the fine print. This ledger is the smoking gun. It's the proof that the ministry was a business, and the business was built on our backs. And now that the paper trail is public, there is no prayer or repentance that can hide the cold, hard math of 20 million. For years, people have asked me, Jill, will your mother ever leave? I always sighed because I knew the depth of the conditioning she was under. But what happened in my last week was something I only dared to pray for. It wasn't a loud public confrontation It was a quiet, desperate, and incredibly brave midnight escape that changed our family's history forever. It all started with a text from Jana. She had been living in Nebraska for months, building a life of her own, a weapon away from the constant surveillance of the compound. She told me, "Jill, Mom reached out. She's ready. But we have to move now before the legal team freezes everything." My heart stopped. My mother, who had spent nearly 40 years under my father's umbrella, was finally ready to step into the rain. The plan was simple but dangerous. Jana drove 10 hours straight from Nebraska to a small, quiet gas station 3 miles away from the Tontitown house. It was 2:00 a.m. My mom had packed only what she could fit into 2 small suitcases, mostly old photos and a few personal items she had hidden for years. She waited until my father was sound asleep, likely exhausted from meeting with his lawyers about the $20 million audit exposed. When she stepped off that porch, she wasn't just leaving a house, she was leaving a kingdom. She walked down that long driveway in the dark, her heart pounding, looking back only once. When she saw Jana's headlights in the distance, she told me later that she felt a weight lift off her shoulders that she didn't even know she was carrying. The drive to Nebraska was silent for the first 3 hours. My mom just stared out the window at the passing trees, watching the Arkansas border disappear in the rearview mirror. Jana said that when they finally crossed into Nebraska, our mom took a deep breath and said, "I think I forgot how to be Michelle. I've only been Mrs. Duggar for so long now." She's in a small, sunny farmhouse with Jana. There are no cameras, no filming schedules, and no one telling her what she's allowed to think. My father's calls have gone unanswered. He's furious, claiming she's been kidnapped by her own daughters, but the truth is much simpler. She wasn't kidnapped. She was rescued by the very children she raised to be silent. Seeing my mom and Jana together in those grainy FaceTime photos from Nebraska, it's the first time I've seen my mother's eyes look truly bright in a decade. The big house is empty of its queen, and the crown is lying on the floor. The escape is complete. Growing up, we weren't just a family. We were a project for an organization called the IBLP. Everything. From the way we dressed to the way we spoke, and even the thoughts we were allowed to have, was dictated by a set of rules known as the basic life principles. For years, we were taught that as long as we stayed under our father's umbrella of protection, we were safe from the world. But as I grew older, I realized that the umbrella wasn't there to protect us from the rain. It was there to make sure we never saw the sun. The breaking point didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, painful process of unlearning. I remember sitting in a seminar as a young woman, listening to Bill Gothard speak about total or prompt obedience. I looked around at my sisters, and for the first time, I saw the fear in their eyes instead of faith. We were being raised to be silent helpmeets, programmed to never question authority, even when that authority was failing us. When Jinger moved to LA, she was the first to start openly dismantling these teachings. She called me one afternoon and said, "Jill, I'm wearing pants today, and the world didn't end. God didn't strike me down. It sounds small to an outsider, but to us, it was an act of war against a system that used clothing as a tool of modesty, shaming. But the real breaking point came when we started looking into how the IBLP handled incidents within the family. We realized that the system was designed to protect the reputation of the men at the top, while the victims were told to forgive and forget for the sake of the ministry. I saw how this ideology was used to justify the financial control my father held over us. He would quote scriptures about honoring your father to keep us from asking for our fair share of the TV earnings. The moment I finally stepped out from under that umbrella was the scariest day of my life. I felt exposed, like I was walking into a storm without a coat. But then I looked back and saw Jinger, then Jana, and now even my mother all walking out beside me. We realized the storm our father warned us about was actually just freedom. We aren't just breaking rules anymore. We are breaking a cycle of spiritual abuse. We are reclaiming our faith, separating it from the cult, like control of the IBLP. My father still sends us letters filled with warnings of divine judgment. But when I look at my life now, my husband, my children, and my peace of mind, I know that the only thing we lost when we left that umbrella was the shadow it cast over our lives. A 20 million forensic audit started circulating among the family and our legal representatives. The atmosphere at the Tontitown compound changed from one of spiritual leadership to a high-stakes war room. My father has always been a man who believes he can fix any situation with the right amount of pressure, the right lawyers, and a carefully crafted public narrative. But this time, the enemy isn't the media or the secular world. It's the truth, and it's coming from inside his own house. I've been told by sources close to the family that the big house has been flooded with high-priced attorneys and PR crisis managers. My father isn't just defending his bank account, he's defending his legacy. He has spent weeks behind closed doors trying to find a way to discredit the audit. His main defense, he claims that we, his children, misunderstood the complex financial structures of the ministry. He's trying to paint us as ungrateful and confused, suggesting that the 20 million wasn't missing, but simply reinvested for the kingdom. But the most hurtful part of his defense strategy is how he's targeting my mother, Michelle, since she fled to Nebraska. His legal team has been drafting statements trying to portray her as emotionally unstable and manipulated by Jinger and me. It's the ultimate betrayal. After 40 years of her standing by his side and birthing 19 children, his first instinct when she seeks freedom is to use the law to try and bring her back under his control. He's also been reaching out to the younger siblings, the ones still living at home or nearby, trying to create a loyalty pledge. He tells them that if the ministry falls, the family's entire security disappears. It's a fear-based tactic that worked for decades, but the cracks are too wide now. He's fighting a losing battle because you can't sue your children into loving you, and you can't use an NDA to silence a conscience that has finally awakened. watching him spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees, the same money we were told didn't exist when we asked for help with our own bills, is the final proof we needed. He's not fighting for the family, he's fighting for the throne. But while he's surrounded by lawyers in Tontitown, the rest of us are surrounded by something much stronger, the truth. And no matter how many defense funds he creates, he can't buy back the trust he broke. For years, my father monitored our phone calls and read our emails. He believed that by controlling our communication, he could control our unity. But he didn't understand that once we grew up and moved away, the digital world would become our underground railroad. While the public saw us smiling on Instagram, behind the scenes, a secret group chat was forming, a place where for the first time in our lives, we were allowed to tell the truth. It started with a simple text from Jinger in late 2025. She sent a screenshot of a bank statement and asked, does anyone else remember being told this money was for charity? That one message opened a floodgate. Suddenly, the silence we had lived in for decades was shattered. We weren't just sisters talking about recipes anymore. We were witnesses comparing evidence. I remember one specific text from Jana. She's always been the one who wanted to believe the best of everyone, but she wrote, I asked Dad about the ministry expenses today, and he told me I was being disobedient just for asking, is this what love looks like? That message broke my heart, but it also fueled my fire. We began sharing the scripts we were forced to read for the show, the NDAs we were pressured to sign, and the lies we were told to tell the media. The group chat became our sanctuary. We called it the garden, a place where things could finally grow without being crushed. We discussed Jana's plan to set up a safe house in Nebraska and Jinger's strategy for her statement in LA. We even shared the verses of scripture that the IBLP had twisted, helping each other find a version of God that wasn't a prison warden. When my father realized he was losing control, he tried to demand access to our phones during family gathering. But for the first time, every single sister in that room said no. He didn't realize that the bond we formed in those private texts was stronger than any umbrella he could ever build. These messages are the heart of our rebellion. They are the proof that even in the darkest systems, the truth will find a way to whisper until it's loud enough to scream. When you look at the old photos of us, 19 kids, all color coordinated, smiling for the cameras, you see a family that looked like a dream. But inside the big house, under the weight of the umbrella of protection, that dream often felt like a carefully constructed prison. We were taught from the moment we could walk that our own hearts were deceitful above all things. We weren't allowed to have feelings, only our responses. If we were sad, we were told we lacked joy. If we were angry, we were told we were rebellious. Growing up under that umbrella meant living in a constant state of hyper vigilance. My father and the IBLP teachings created a world where everything was a potential sin. Music, books, even the way we looked at our own brothers and sisters was monitored. We were raised to be performers. We knew exactly how to tilt our heads, how to joyfully obey, and how to hide the bruises on our souls so the ministry would never suffer. Remember a blanket training and the hours spent in quiet rooms, learning that our will had to be broken before it could be used by God. But whose God were we serving? As I look back now, I realize we were serving the image of Jim Bob Duggar. Yeah. The umbrella wasn't there to keep us safe. It was there to keep us hidden. It kept the secrets of the abuse within the walls, telling us that to speak out was to dishonor our parents and invite the judgment of heaven. The trauma wasn't just in the big events everyone knows about. It was in the 1,000 daily silences. It was in being told that my body was a stumbling block for men. It was in the crushing weight of knowing that my only value in that house was my ability to be a submissive daughter and a future mother. Jinger, and I often talk about the phantom umbrella, that feeling even now, years later, that someone is watching us, waiting for us to fail so they can pull us back into the shadow. But as we peel back the layers of this trauma in therapy, we are finding something beautiful. We are finding that our voices, which were suppressed for so long, are actually quite loud. We are learning that God doesn't need an umbrella to protect us. He just needs us to be honest. The big house is full of echoes now, but out here in the light, we are finally learning how to be whole. Growing up in front of millions of people, we were told that our lives belonged to the ministry. We were told that every smile we gave to the camera was a seed planted for God's glory. But as the forensic audit has now confirmed, those smiles were being harvested for a very different kind of kingdom. For decades, our silence had a price tag, but it was a price that we, the ones doing the work, never got to see. I remember the early days of filming. We were told that we were volunteers in a family mission. When the checks started coming in from TLC, they didn't go into accounts for the children who were working 14-hour days. They went into a single entity controlled entirely by my father. When I finally worked up the courage to ask about my earnings after years of being the lead on the show, the response wasn't a conversation about fairness. It was a lecture on greed and filial piety. I was told that my silence and my participation were my duty as a daughter. The cost of that silence was more than just missing paychecks. It was the cost of our autonomy. By withholding the money we had earned, my father ensured that none of us had the exit fund necessary to leave the system. We were financially shackled to the big house. If we wanted a car, a house, or even help with medical bills, we had to go through him. And that help always came with strings attached, strings that required us to keep filming, keep smiling, and never ever tell the truth about what was happening behind the scenes. Jinger and I have often talked about how much our image was worth to the brand. Every time we went through a crisis, the PR team would calculate how much a positive family update would be worth in ad revenue. Our trauma was literally being monetized. The audit shows that while we were being told the ministry was barely getting by, millions were being moved into real estate holdings and private trusts. The cost of my silence almost cost me my marriage and my mental health. But today, I realize that no amount of money is worth the weight of a secret. My father thought that by keeping us broke, he could keep us quiet. He didn't realize that once we tasted the freedom of the truth, we didn't care about his inheritance anymore. We aren't for sale, and our voices are no longer part of the Duggar business model. If you had told me a year ago that my mother would be waking up in a quiet farmhouse in Nebraska, miles away from the nearest camera or church committee, I wouldn't have believed you. But today, that is her reality. Since Jana helped her leave Arkansas, my mother has been experiencing something she hasn't felt since she was a teenager, a life without a schedule dictated by someone else. In Nebraska, life is different. Jana has created a sanctuary there, a place filled with plants, soft light, and actual peace. I've been getting FaceTime calls from them, and for the first time in my life, I'm not talking to Michelle Duggar, the mother of 19. I'm talking to Michelle, the woman. She told me the other day that she spent an entire morning just sitting on the porch watching the wind move through the wheat fields. No one told her she had to be productive. No one told her she had to keep a joyful countenance for the public. She was just allowed to be. Jana has been the perfect guardian for her. She's been teaching Mom how to use a smartphone without filters, how to navigate a world where she doesn't have to ask permission to buy a coffee, and how to process the decades of noise she's been living in. Mom even started a small garden. She said that touching the soil in Nebraska feels different than the soil in Tontitown. It feels like it belongs to her, not to a ministry. But it's not all easy. There are moments of deep grief. Mom often cries when she realizes how much of her children's lives were managed rather than enjoyed. She's processing the 20 million audit just like the rest of us, and the realization that her husband's financial leadership was actually a web of deception has been devastating. But in Nebraska, she has the space to cry without being told she's failing God. My father continues to send angry emails and has even tried to involve local authorities in Nebraska, claiming undue influence. But the authorities there saw a woman who was happy, healthy, and finally free. Jana told me that Mom's first Sunday in Nebraska, they didn't go to a massive televised service. They just sat in a small local chapel, and for the first time, Mom didn't have to sit in the front row as a trophy. She sat in the back, a simple woman seeking a real connection with a real God. This isn't just a move, it's a resurrection. While Mom was finding peace in Nebraska, Jinger was preparing to drop a bombshell from Los Angeles. For years, Jinger was known as a compliant one, the sister who followed the rules most perfectly. But that made her voice even more dangerous when she finally spoke. She called me and said, "Jill, I'm not just writing a book anymore. I'm issuing a manifesto." In her statement, she didn't just talk about her own journey. She addressed the systemic financial abuse head on. She looked into the camera and told the world that the ministry was a business and the children were the product. The most powerful part was when she addressed our father directly, saying, "You can keep the millions, Dad, but you can't keep us." That statement wasn't just for the public. It was the final nail in the coffin of the old Duggar brand. It showed that no matter how far away we moved, the truth would always find a platform. But what about the ones left behind while we were finding our freedom? Our hearts were breaking for our younger siblings still at the compound. My father has tightened his grip on them, using them as damage control for his social media. We see the pain in their eyes through the screen. We have a secret line of communication with a few of them, and they are scared. They see the 20 million audit. They see mom is gone, and they are starting to ask the questions we once feared to ask. The rebellion isn't just 3 or 4 of us anymore. It's a slow, burning fire moving through the entire family tree. My father's PR team has been working overtime. They've tried to plant stories that Jinger and I are bitter or seeking fame. They even tried to release old, edited footage to show how happy we used to be. But the world isn't buying it anymore. Every time they release us a happy family update, we counter it with a fact from the forensic audit. It's a war for the narrative, but you can't spin a 20 million hole in the bank account. The era of the perfect family on TV is dead, and the era of the resilient survivors has begun. None of this would be possible without the work we've done in therapy. For years, we were told that psychology was worldly and dangerous. But sitting in those sessions, Jinger and I realized that we weren't broken. We were just survivors of a very specific kind of control. We've had to grieve for the childhoods we lost and the money that was taken. But more importantly, we've learned how to trust our own voices again. Healing is the ultimate act of defiance against a system that wanted us to stay wounded and dependent. A few weeks ago, there was a meeting. It wasn't televised, and there were no cameras. It was just me, Jinger, via video, and my father. We presented him with the audit and a simple request: release the younger kids from their contracts and let mom live her life in peace. His response was a mix of denial and spiritual guilt tripping. He still believes he is the victim. He looked at us and said we were destroying the work of God. We looked back and told him, "No, Dad, we are just exposing the work of man." That was the last time I spoke to him. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was dismantled. So where do we go from here? The big house in Tontitown is quiet now. The 20 million is being tracked by lawyers, but the real wealth is in Nebraska, in LA, in Oklahoma, and in every home where a Duggar sister is finally speaking her mind. We are building a new legacy, one based on truth instead of performance and love instead of law. My father built an empire on our silence, but we are building a future on our voices. The Duggar empire has fallen, but the Duggar sisters, we are just getting started. This isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of our lives.